Good morning. Good to be with you again on the side porch, my office away from the office, with the second cup of coffee. Wanted to reflect just a little bit more about Easter today. Next Sunday, I started to say when we go to church next Sunday, but unfortunately, for most of us, we'll be watching church remotely from our homes. In my case, I'll be in a church speaking to an empty room on Facebook Live. But if you were in church, you would notice that the paraments are still white. We use white paraments on Easter. Use the white paraments on the high holy days, the really important celebrations, the Christmas and Easter. Let's see, Christ the King Sunday, All Saints Sunday, things like that are the liturgical color is going to be white. And this next Sunday, you will notice, if you're observing, that the paraments will be white. Well, why is that? Easter's gone and over, isn't it? Well, not quite. Easter isn't quite over yet. Easter isn't just one day. It's a whole season. I actually get liturgical about it. Easter is 50 days. It runs from Easter Sunday through Pentecost. Sometimes called the Great 50 Days. And so in our churches, you'll see white paraments up all through those 7 weeks or so between Easter and Pentecost. Easter isn't just a day. It's a whole season. I'm going to read a little bit from Mark. This is from Mark 16. This is Mark's account of the resurrection. When the Sabbath was past, Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James, and Salome brought spices so that they might go and anoint him. And very early on the first day of the week, when the sun had risen, they went to the tomb. And they were saying to one another, "Who will roll away the stone for us from the entrance of the tomb?" And looking up, they saw that the stone had been rolled back. It was very large. And entering the tomb, they saw a young man sitting on the right, dressed in a white robe, and they were alarmed. And he said to them, "Do not be alarmed. You seek Jesus of Nazareth, who was crucified. He has risen. He is not here. See the place where they laid him? But go tell his disciples and Peter that he has gone before you to Galilee. There you will see him just as he told you." And they went out and fled from the tomb, for trembling and astonishment had seized them. And they said nothing to anyone, for they were afraid. They said nothing to anyone, for they were afraid. Why didn't I keep reading? An interesting question. The best manuscripts that we have for the Gospel of Mark end right there. The best available manuscripts for the Gospel of Mark end right there, with the women running away from the tomb with fear and trembling, not saying a word to anybody. It is an abrupt ending. It doesn't seem to quite fit. But I remember in seminary having a professor who spent the better part of a class period talking about this ending and making sense of it for us. And it was powerful that this ending of Mark, which seems so abrupt, really is intentional. Look at it this way, like it's a cliffhanger. Some TV shows have cliffhangers. You watch the TV show, and the way it ends, you've got to tune in next week. You just can't not watch the next week. If we watch NCIS a lot, and at the end of last season, one of their former cast members, Ziva David, makes this mysterious ending appearance right at the end of the episode, and everybody's got to watch the first episode of this year. It's the cliffhanger. Movies do it, TV shows do it, and maybe that's what's going on here. Maybe that's what's going on here, that Mark gives us this. The women go to the tomb. They're going to anoint the body. They're not expecting resurrection. They know, as we do, that dead people stay dead. Who's going to roll the stone away? Oh, it's gone. The stone's gone. An angel shows up and says he's risen, and they're terrified. And truth be told, I'd be scared too. And I think most of us would have been. We see there's an empty tomb where tombs aren't supposed to be empty. There's an angel, and every time angels show up in the Bible, people are scared, and they run away terrified, not saying a word to anybody. But here's the delicious thing. We know that at some point the women told somebody. We know that at some point the women told somebody, but we don't know how it took place, or at least not according to Mark. And which leaves us to ponder about that. How did they do that? How did these women who were so terrified leaving the tomb, how did they go on to become the first evangelists? And so Mark sort of leaves this cliffhanger, inviting us to sort of write ourselves into the picture, inviting us to sort of envision ourselves there. How do we do that? And the word from the angels is, go to the disciples, tell them to go to Galilee, and there Jesus will meet you. Galilee is where the ministry had begun. Had begun 3 years before. Galilee is where his ministry had begun. And the angel says, tell the disciples, go to Galilee, which means that there is a new beginning to the ministry. There is a new beginning to it for their ministry, that their ministry isn't over, that there's a new beginning to it. So, tell the disciples, hightail it to Galilee, and you're going to begin your ministry there. And that is so powerful. Just think about this. That is where Jesus is inviting us, or the angel is inviting us to go to Galilee, wherever our Galilee is, and begin the ministry again. This is Easter. This is Easter. A devotional writer used the phrase one time a few years ago that we are Easter people living in a Good Friday world. I just came across that phrase a couple of days ago. Easter people living in a Good Friday world. Reflect on that. We know what Good Friday is. Good Friday is the day of death. Good Friday is the day that Jesus was crucified, the day that he died, the day where the sky was black for 3 hours from noon to 3 in the afternoon. It's a day of darkness. But we are Easter people. We are Easter people living in a Good Friday world. The world knows Good Friday really well, particularly right now when we've got the pandemic going around that is so contagious, and I think all of us, or so many people, are scared. They're at ease. You see somebody in the store, and we instinctively sort of take 2 or 3 steps back. And the world knows Good Friday really well right now, but we are called to be Easter people in the midst of the Good Friday. And I think we do that in two ways. The first is we live our lives in the hope of resurrection. We live our lives in the hope of resurrection. We know that because Christ is risen from the dead, that the entire way that we look at the world is different. If Christ is really risen from the dead, then the way we look at the world is different, and we have hope. I mean, if death has been defeated, we don't need to worry about anything, really, do we? If the ultimate enemy is death, and that's been defeated, the entire way that we look at the world should be different. So we live as Easter people in a Good Friday world by looking at the world differently, looking at the world through the lens of Easter, looking at the world through the lens of resurrection and defeat of death. And then the second thing, living as Easter people, is this: that we carry out the mission of Easter. What was the mission of Easter? Go to the disciples and tell them to go to Galilee. That is the mission of Easter. The mission of Easter for these women is go tell them, go tell them, go tell them. And so that is the mission of Easter for us. The mission of Easter is to go tell that Christ has risen from the dead, to go tell the world that Christ has risen from the dead, to, in other words, go to Galilee, wherever our Galilee is, and begin the ministry there. We live as Easter people in a Good Friday world. We live as Easter people, meaning we live in the light of the hope of resurrection. We live as Easter people by carrying out the mission of Easter, which is go and tell. One more thing I'll mention this morning. We worship on Sunday mornings. Nearly all, the vast majority of Christians worship on Sunday mornings. Why is that? Sunday's Resurrection Day. Even the very earliest Christians, who were predominantly Jewish, they would have observed the Jewish Sabbath, but they worshipped on Sunday. Why is that? Because Sunday's Resurrection Day. The very earliest Christians who were Jews would have gone to the synagogue on the Sabbath, which is Saturday, but they would have worshipped on Sunday because Sunday is Resurrection Day. And every Sunday that we have the chance to go to worship in our churches, we are celebrating the resurrection. Think about that as we try to be Easter people in a Good Friday world. Hope you all have a great day. And I will see you next Wednesday morning, same time, same bat channel.